What did your parents do while raising you that you swore to not do to your kids? My parents, mostly mom, can never admit if she's wrong. If she is, she just screams at you about an entirely different topic to make you look like the bad guy. My mom does it too, but it's gone from using the "you can't argue with me because I am always right" fit to the "you're not the only one who's college educated around here" manipulation. She's right, but my degree is in biochemistry, chemical engineering, and hers is in teaching. I think I know a thing or two more about genetics and human metabolism, mom. End of rant. Give them false stories about my life. I'm not a parent yet, but I don't think you need to pretend to do super things to be seen as a superhero by your kids. Regularly feed them junk food and fast food, and by regularly I mean like every day. Turn everything into a competition. I participated in a lot of activities growing up. Some were more competitive than others, but to my parents, especially my father, I had to be the best at everything. They constantly compared me to other kids who had different circumstances and different drives from my own. And if I picked up a new activity, even something as mediocre as writing poetry, they immediately set about finding a way I could win a trophy or get money from it. I mean, I know that their intentions was to push me to be the best I could be, but the ultimate result was that I walked away from things because I didn't want the constant competition. It meant I ended up hating a lot of things I once loved. Well, Dad, if you made as much money as Brian's dad, we could afford better training and equipment. Good job, Dad. Not be able to provide a reason for a rule's existence. To a 2-year-old because I said so is a good enough reason, but to a 16-year-old it's infuriating. Constantly making jokes about me being a lesbian. I'm not a lesbian, never was, but my mom, bless her, had been pretty convinced I might turn out gay at some point. I was very masculine for a girl. I mostly hung out with boys, and I wrestled from middle school up through senior year of high school. Looking back, I nearly became homophobic because of the constant jokes from my mom and my aunt about it. My mom would assure me that whatever you do, or whoever you love, I will always love you, no matter what, but in the same breath would make jokes. The funniest part now is that my mom came out of the closet not long after I moved off to go to college. Projection. Mom, it's a thing. Never tell my sister or I that they were proud of us, or being, and this is the nickname all of our friends gave them, the dream crushers, and not encouraging or actively preventing totally achievable childhood, adolescent, teenage goals and dreams. No privacy. They didn't respect our need for privacy and time to be quiet or alone. My mom would just enter the washroom while I'm showering, sitting on the toilet, and just start doing her thing like brush her teeth or start talking to me or whatever. WTF. Punish them for any display of emotion. I'm slowly learning to express my emotions in healthy ways, but for a long time I bottled them up until they exploded. It wasn't a great way to live. I was never punished for displaying emotion, but expressing it just wasn't something that really happened in my house. On the downside, I don't like to hug people and I can't say I love you without it sounding forced. On the upside, I have one heck of a poker face. Compare me with other children. More often than not, it doesn't create motivation, but it's extremely easy for kids to feel insecure in that they are nothing but disappointments to their parents. My mom worked hard and had a bit of a short temper when I was growing up, so the punishment for failure outstepped any rewards for success. Because of that temper, she was also very hands-off with a lot of my schoolwork. She couldn't scale to the issue. I'd get screamed at for a project she would help me with for not being good enough, only to have it get an A. Eventually I stopped asking and kept as much to myself as possible. Also, I got yelled at and punished for an F, but an A+ in honors got just a good job. It undermined my motivation big time and created a mentality of doing just enough to get by and avoid punishment, but not to push harder than needed. The extra effort would only set the bar for failure higher the next time. I never want to do that to my kids. I want to reward them for success and motivate them through and over shortcomings. I never want them to feel like there is a roof to their success or a creeping threshold for failure. Ask my child where's the other 4 points when she brings home a 96% on an exam that she studied extremely hard for. That Asian parent nonsense will not occur in this house. They're still expected to get good grades though. A's gets approval, B's get you beatings, C's get you cuts, and D equals your death. Allowed physical and verbal abuse, drinking in the home, showed no affection, discouraged socialization, intentional embarrassment, only giving negative feedback, not encourage personal growth. I do not have kids yet, but I will do my best to give them everything I never received. Have lived a lonely life, but I will make sure my offspring will feel my love in a way they appreciate. Row. My mom practically forced me to pursue a career on finances because she really wanted me to be rich. Since I was a teenager, I've always been interested in sociology and anthropology, and that interest has increased over the years, but now I just don't have the time for it. Despite doing pretty well, I can't help wondering what could have been had I pursued the social sciences instead. I will always support my children on their interests no matter what they are. Advice from someone too deep in poverty to do anything with this wasted life. Save up and pursue what you want to do if you can. I will never take it personally if my child tells me they are depressed. So many years spent depressed and feeling guilty for making my mom feel like a bad parent. I feel this. Mine straight up told me I should be ashamed for being sad because I bring down the room. 1. Be too lazy to help. My parents would just throw their hands up. I don't know how to do that. Figure it out yourself, then keep watching TV. Then they'd complain I didn't spend time with them. How about we spend time together doing something constructive? 2. Offer to buy things only to complain about them later. My mother is still the worst about this. She'll insist on buying you something, and you'll refuse. Then okay, if it'll make you happy, buy me that sweater. Then later on she'll complain about how expensive the sweater was and how broke she is. 3. Lie in order to get my way. They still do it. My parents wanted me to go on vacation with them in Mexico and I said no, because it's too expensive. They offered to pay for it and I still said no. See above. Finally they insisted and said they'd pay for the hotel. I just had to cover airfare. So I said yes, but I have to have my own room. I'm too old to share rooms. I need my own space where I can go chill out when family drama gets too intense. They said yes. I fly my butt to freaking Mexico and go to check into my room. There's no reservation. I call my mom and I'm sharing a room with my sister, her boyfriend, and my nephew. Oh, they were out of rooms so we had to put you together. My mom said, I specifically told you I would only come if I had my own room. You lied to me. I said, I didn't lie. I tried to get an extra room and they're overbooked. She didn't try and they weren't. But whatever. Sure, that might be the case, but you knew goddamn well that I wouldn't come if I didn't have my own room. So you didn't tell me. Well, I'm paying so much money for these rooms. I can't believe you wanted me to spend that money in the first place. And we're back to 2. Using my child as a pawn to get what I want, or prioritizing money over your child. My mother regularly used me to manipulate my father, and it fricked with me in a lot of ways. When they divorced, she convinced me my dad was abusive, and used me to get more money from him. After the divorce was finalized, she called him and said, I'll trade you our daughter for more alimony. He says he got the better side of the deal. Money is crap when your kid is involved, but not to my mom. Physically shame them. Shouldn't be too difficult, I imagine. Dude. I'm still a teenager, but I swear I will never 1. Push my kids to tell the truth then punish them for it. 2. Make my kids worry about having a place to live and a roof over their heads. 3. Make my kids choose between having a relationship with me and practicing a religion they don't agree with. Let kids be kids. The second one hits home. If I didn't do the things my mother ordered me to do, she would threaten to throw me outside with only a blanket and lock the door, even during winter. And if I didn't tidy up my stuff, she would throw them in the trash. I'd never make commitments for my kids without consulting them first. This pee me off so much more than anything else as a kid. Grandparents need to hang their Christmas lights. Hey, no problem, I'll send Jumpire Bones over. Neighbor needs help hanging drywall in their garage. We got you covered with our slave laborer. Doesn't matter if it's his weekend. had plans with friends or wanted to literally do anything besides what we tell him to, then they take credit for your hard work. Oh, thanks so much for sending your son over. Oh, no problem. Anytime. We raised this one right. Frick that crap. I do not miss being a kid. Are the good old voluntold. Shout at them for bad things but don't even consider a kind word for good things. Bad grade, lazy butt, you should have done more. Best grade of the entire class, aha. I almost cried when I visited a friend and her mother comforted her when she got a bad result in a test. Oh yeah, telling me to put me up for adoption if I make trouble was very nice, too. Fill their heads with balls. Random crap my parents taught me. Blood is actually blue. Ghosts exist and we should respect and fear them. Everything unexplained usually has a supernatural reason. Aliens make crop circles. Wicca is the one true religion. Every time you break anything in the wild, you need to apologize to nature. Meanwhile, she drinks only from plastic bottles. Tongues have taste centers. My grandmother is haunting me. There are evil people out there with no reason for their actions but to hurt others. I believe in the Game of Thrones style of evil, in that people perform evil acts, but they have a grand purpose that makes sense to them. Who knew this was such controversial information? Guilt tripped me into giving them money to satisfy the various addictions in their lives. For me, that's a twofer. I don't gamble, smoke, drink, do recreational drugs, because addiction apparently runs in my family, nor will I look to my kids for financial support. I'd seriously just take myself out if things ever got that bad for me. Take my anger out on them knowingly when stressed about something else. I'm sure I will mess up and this will happen once or twice, but it was such a repeated thing in our household and it vastly contributed to my anxiety and fear of failure. You're right that everyone does mess up on occasion. I made a huge effort to then apologize to my kid. A true apology. I did this. It was wrong. I am sorry. This is how it won't happen again. Try and root them into my interests alone. My dad is a car guy. Loves talking about them. Loves working on them. Growing up, we always had at least 2 working vehicles and 3 others in various states of repair, and occasionally an engine block hanging from a chain. I was kind of a nerdy kid. All I wanted to do was read books, play video games, and ride my bike for hours on end. I had no interest in polishing a chrome bumper. When I got to driving age, my dad taught me the basics. How to change oil, plugs, change tires, etc. He taught me basic troubleshooting, but that's all I cared about. He was deeply offended when I told him that I didn't care to learn how to rebuild an engine, and that I would one day just take my car to a mechanic. When I got a car, I drove it home, and just left it in the driveway until it was time to go again. My dad was confused why I was up in my room reading and didn't stay out there, washing it and waxing every day. That was a deep divide for us. My kids have some different interests than me, and they have varied interests. I let them explore everything, and don't degrade anything. Discourage me from crying. My parents were raised to believe that crying is bad and would get mad when I used to do it. It didn't make me stop crying. I just learned to cry privately and keep my sadness to myself. I'm almost 19 and still trying to unlearn this. If you don't stop, I'll give you something to cry about. I can't even cry in front of my boyfriend, and I trust him with my life. Everything stays bottled up, forever, comma. It's more something that they didn't rather than something they did do. My parents pretty much never believed me when I said things were bad. My primary school principal was locking kids in a tiny room with no carpet, stripped walls, and no light. It was called the timeout room. I never got shut in there, but I knew kids who did. I told my parents about it. They didn't believe me. They said that there was no way she'd do that because locking children away like that is a fire hazard. A few months later there was a police inquiry and later it made the newspapers. I showed my parents and they shrugged it off. Well, it didn't happen to you, so who cares? I was bullied all through primary school. I told them I was being bullied, and on my first day of high school I had no friends, so I ate my lunch on the toilet like that scene in Mean Girls. My mum didn't believe me because in her head I was too smart and pretty to be unpopular. Then I kept telling my parents we had rats. I could hear them at night running around inside the walls. My friends had heard it too, and I saw a couple of them outside on the lawn. I told my parents. Once again, They didn't believe me. They were convinced I was imagining things. Only once I left home did they actually start seeing the rats themselves. And now I'm being threatened online by some people my mother wants me to be friends with. Yet again, she doesn't believe me. That's a really long story though, and this comment is already quite long. Basically, when I'm a parent, I may be a bit skeptical about certain things my children tell me. I won't blindly believe everything they say, but dismissing every concern they have as being all in their head is something I definitely won't do. Now I'm being threatened online by some people my mother wants me to be friends with. If you ever have the time and are willing to share the story, I'd like to know it. Got me intrigued. The only mistake I think my parents did when educating me, I think it was an education that kind of discouraged social interaction. It's not that we weren't allowed to go out with friends. It's that we didn't even give it a thought. It worked well in the sense that it kept us out of trouble, but I think a bit of socialization would have done me a lot of good. Any extracurricular my sister or I did, my mother had to get involved. I'm not doing that. Yes, my mother was on every parents' council at school, became a scout leader when I joined, and over-involved herself in every other extracurricular. It felt like nothing was ever just mine. Backstory: when I was growing up I had an older half-sibling that was 7 years older than me. We have the same mom, but different dads. He started stealing and using drugs at a very young age. My mom would constantly make excuses for him, such as he is bipolar and is addicted to drugs, so it is a disease and not him doing those things. He would steal from us and constantly be overdosed in our house. She didn't want him to get in trouble or cause a scene, so she wouldn't want to call 911. She would monitor his respirations and he would sleep it off. She never punished him, just yelled at him as he was in and out of jail. He would do something terrible and get kicked out, then go to jail. After getting out of jail, he would come back to live with us for a few months until getting kicked out again. He lived with my grandma for a few years and made her life heck. He would bring friends in at all hours of the day, steal from her, and harass her constantly for money. I've honestly always hated him. But the breaking point for me was when I came home from nursing school while living at home and noticed my room in shambles. I had locked my door. I noticed my fiance's wedding band that was deeply hidden was gone. I found him passed out in the kitchen with him wearing it. I pulled it off his finger, confronted him, and he said he found it. I grabbed my valuable belongings and drove to my sister's house. I called my mom and dad when they got home to let them know. My dad then found out that my brother had stolen and sold my brother's Xbox while he was at boot camp training. My dad and brother got in a physical fight. My brother got kicked out and went to jail. I honestly don't remember for what. It has been happening for over 20 years. I found out he was getting out of jail and coming back to live at home. This was when I decided to move out with my fiancé, and it was the best decision ever. My mom will lie about her contact with my brother. She will send him snacks and money in jail. They pay for expensive lawyers for him. It has ruined relationships. We don't talk to my mom's side of the family. My parents' marriage was compromised. I haven't seen or talked to my brother in around 5 years. I should probably get over it, but I am still shaken up from this. When I think of my childhood, a big part of it is him ruining our lives. So, to answer your question, I will never compromise the needs of my whole family for someone like that. Calling my sister the best child while making fun of me from ages 3 to 15. Forced religion on me. Every Sunday mass and Bible study until I was about 13. I've grown past it now, but I don't want my kids to think that there are no other answers beyond God. I want them to be able to think for themselves. Yell. Fight with each other, with violence, drug and alcohol use in front of us. No jobs or desire to better themselves. My parents were very physically abusive. I do not hit my kids. I also help my kids with their homework. Stay married to one another despite their obvious misery and incompatibility. I was so happy when they finally got divorced. Now they've both been happily married to my step-parents for almost 20 years, which makes me wish they had split up when I was a baby so I'd have been a kid with happy parents. Using the statement "just ignore them" to solve bullying. Or, well, you must have done something to deserve it. They failed to teach me that emotions are okay. It is okay to be angry if you are told to not eat candy before bed. It is okay to be sad. You are not allowed to stay out late. Your emotions are okay. It will not change anything, but you are allowed to be angry or sad. Also, they used to hit me. My mom never trusted me. She just assumed I would be like she was as a teenager and punished me for the mistakes she made. She also was really dismissive of my worries and fears when I was a child. I try my best to realize that even if my kids' problems seem small to me, they are a big deal to them. Same with the trust thing. Was always truthful with my parents, but mom still never trusted me. She was upset for weeks when the police wouldn't let her rent drug sniffing dogs to go through my room after I got a rash on my arm in middle school. Everything I liked was for boys. Couldn't play the quads. Cuts and bruises meant no one would find me attractive. A preference for the copious pockets of cargo shorts to the restriction of skirts and pocketbooks made me a tomboy. I will never attack or categorize my child in the things she does or does not enjoy. Burden them with how tight money is. There's no reason for my children to be scared to ask for things that they need or even want. It's not their fault that money doesn't grow on trees, so why should they worry about it? I will teach them about being fiscally responsible when they get into their teens, but even then they don't need to know the details about the household bills. They just need to know that we pay the bills, put food on the table, buy the necessities, and some extra stuff. I agree with this. My parents, compulsory, I love them, but would go as far as to pantomime financial struggle around my siblings and I. So I grew up thinking spending $5 or $10 on something was a goddamn crime. They reproduced, and I swore I'd never have kids. You should remain celibate to be a good example for your kids. There are loads of silly ones, like I swore I would never say stop that now, or I'll turn the car around, or any of those ridiculous parenty catchphrases. I still bloody do it though, and I make dad jokes all the time, despite vivid memories of finding my own dad's jokes terribly embarrassing. On a more serious note, I wish my parents had shown me more physical affection, so I make sure to cuddle my boy as much as he'll let me. Favoritism. There were numerous times where my sister or I would have a project at school and we would need to go to the dollar store to pick up some things. Our mom would help us and bounce ideas on what we should do for the project, but for me, the help from my parents stopped there. Meanwhile, my mom would practically do my sister's projects for her. I very rarely got help from my parents, unless it was some stupid stoichiometry problems that only my dad could help me with. My sister has had things handed to her because she was mommy's favorite little girl. I don't have kids now, but I wouldn't want to choose favorites. I think that growing up with favoritism being shown kind of left some resentment issues with my sister. Screaming. Growing up, my mom would scream at the top of lungs at my sister and I when we would pee her off. Her screaming right in my ear is probably the reason why I have tinnitus in my ears. She would also grab me by the ear and drag me into my room. My ear would be red, hot and throbbing. Having a screaming match solved nothing and only left us with sore throats and one of my ears. Moving all the dang time. By the time I was 16 I'd had 17 different addresses. That said, I'm 40 now and opted not to have any kids, but if I did, I still wouldn't do this to them. I know how that goes. My parents have kind of dragged us along everywhere since, well, ever. I was brought to 11 different countries before I was 18. Didn't ever bother keeping track, cause I didn't even know I'd been to Greece as a baby until recently. It messes you up good. I feel like I never got that one-on-one time with my mom or dad when I was a teenager. We never hung out to just talk or do something fun. As an adult I feel as though we could have had a better relationship when I was growing up. Even now neither of my parents reach out for one-on-one time with me and I feel distant from them. I feel like a lot of advice and stories and just overall connection has been lost due to a lack of quality time when I was growing up. I don't want to be like that with my kids. I want to tell them things that happened in my life, good and bad. Ignore them when they are upset or crying. It was very much cultural for my parents, but when I would get upset about something and every time I cried, they would leave the room, or sit there and just completely ignore me. They never spoke to me, asked me what was wrong, comforted me, or even looked in my direction even after I was done crying. I was left alone a lot and never really figured out how to deal with my sadness or those feelings of disappointment. As an adult, I struggle with some aspects of intimacy and have low tolerance for other sadness because I was never taught to sit with my own and handle the emotion. Even if my kid is freaking out crying over something seemingly minuscule, I want to talk to them about it, even just for a minute so they know how to cope with their feelings. Like this video and this good boy will play you a nice song. Like and subscribe, you magnificent person.